Good morning. Today we need to address a few things, and this is messages specifically for the professionals, doctors, counselors. What we need to address is I'm hearing a number of scenarios where professionals are pressuring people to undergo the gender reassignment treatments, hormone therapies, etc. In many cases, when the person is still questioning and still working through their different feelings, and rather than getting a supportive listening ear and some help figuring out where those feelings started, these professionals are pressuring the client to undergo the gender reassignment when the person is struggling with gender dysphoria. Now, for those who may not know, gender dysphoria, long story short, it's when you don't feel comfortable in the gender that you were born with. And there's a lot of people, who struggle with this, and it is a real struggle. It can't be minimized. Who were born a certain way, but they feel different urges. In some cases, they feel urges that are typically assigned to both male and to both female. It's a real struggle, and it does need some attention. But what it doesn't need is pressure to say, you know what, because you feel this way, you have to be this, and this is your identity now. If you're a counselor, or a doctor, you basically have taken an oath that says do no harm. But if you're pressuring somebody to do something that they're not ready to do, that by definition is doing harm, and it needs to stop. Furthermore, when you talk about gender dysphoria and a number of other conditions, when you take time to listen and ask the question, when did you start feeling this way? In a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot, you'll find that there's a correlation of some very, very extreme cases of abuse. And for a lot of people, they've been through some really horrific abuse. And in that abuse, they started to grab a hold of an identity that was formed out of that abuse. And they've started to ask questions about themselves, like maybe I'm this way, maybe I'm that way. And those questions stemmed from the abuse that they went through. And so to recap, somebody was born just a certain way. They became abused. They started to say, well, maybe I'm this or maybe I'm that. And now they're coming to a counselor, and the counselor is saying, well, definitely that identity that you gained from that abuse, that is who you are, and you have to be that. Rather than helping them work through the feelings of that abuse, work through the confusion that may have happened based on the abuse, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the identity that started from the abuse, and that's harmful, that's damaging, and that needs to stop. Before I go any further, I'll just make a little disclaimer. I've talked to a number of people in my life, and in a counseling situation, I've counseled different people from multiple different sexual orientations, if you will. Never once did I impose my own value system on them. As many of you know, I do believe in traditional marriage. But never once did I say, well, I can't counsel you because you're gay, or I never once did I say, well, you shouldn't be living this way, you should be living that way. If somebody came to me wanting to work on anxiety, let's talk about that. If somebody came to me struggling with depression, we talked about that. My goal has always been best interest of whoever is talking to me. Let's get to the root of what you're dealing with, and let's help you find some healing from that place. And so this is not based on my own value system. This is based on what you as a professional have agreed to in taking the oath of do no harm. Now, I want to speak to doctors for a minute, and then I want to speak to people who struggle with gender dysphoria. Doctors have a lot of pressure on them now, and unfortunately, there was a time when people who became doctors did so because they wanted to help people. I still genuinely believe that there are people out there like that. But unfortunately, the medical profession has become one of cover your butt, pretty much. And you live in danger of being sued all the time. And, you're basically making a lot of decisions in your practice out of fear that you're going to get sued, fear that some group is going to come after you because you didn't prescribe a certain way that you thought that they were wanting you to prescribe. Why do I say all this? We're going to talk about the issue of puberty blockers, gender reassignment, that sort of thing. Now, if an adult comes to you, that's one thing. But I do not see any scenario in which somebody pre-pubescent or adolescent coming to you seeking puberty blockers, especially without their parents' consent, I do not see any scenario in which that is a good idea. And here's why. If you look at Erikson's life stage development model, what you'll find is people in their adolescence, early to mid-teens, sometimes later, sometimes it takes you into your 20s to figure this out, their conflict is identity versus role confusion. In other words, teenagers are in the process of learning who they are. In many cases, they're experimenting. In many cases, they're trying on different identities to figure out who they are. If you know any teenagers, and if you know any teenagers in their 15, 16, even shortly after that, if anybody in that age group, if you know somebody that knows exactly who they are and what they're all about, and that's always who they're going to be, congratulate them, because that's rare. Most of people in that age group, they don't know who they are. They're still trying to figure it out. They're trying to sort, their social, dynamics. And so to give somebody a medication that is permanent in a phase of life that is very, very, very transient and impermanent, it's just, logically, it just doesn't make sense. You're going to give somebody puberty blockers. You're going to give somebody something that goes against what their biology, what their body is trying to do in a time of their life where they still haven't figured out who they are. So just to review, somebody doesn't know who they are. You're giving them something that defines who they are. They're not ready for that yet, especially without their parents' consent. I just do not see any logical way that is a good idea. So this is more of a systemic thing, and it's going to probably take a lot of doctors standing up to this tendency in order to make it, make any kind of difference. But if you're a doctor, I would like to encourage you to start questioning this system. Start to make decisions not based out of fear of what somebody might say if you refuse to prescribe these, but to think about what might be best for a child. Giving them a medication that blocks what's natural for them before a time where they even know who they are. Talk to your colleagues. Talk to the people above you. Let's start to help make people make better decisions. Lastly, I want to talk to those of you who might be struggling with gender dysphoria. What I want to acknowledge is if you have struggled with this, you've probably heard two different extremes. One extreme is the voice that says, you should be ashamed, you shouldn't feel this way, it's wrong, it's bad, it's dirty. I don't believe that's a good voice to listen to. On the other extreme, you hear people say, well, if you feel this way, then you definitely need to go to this treatment and do this and do that and become that other gender and just go that way and never look back. I don't think it's quite that straightforward. I think it's a little more complicated than that. And I'm not going to claim to have all the answers. I'm not going to claim that I understand the struggle. But what I am going to do is I want to just let you know I understand that it is a struggle. And I wanted to just encourage you to find somebody that's going to not be in either of those extremes, but just to listen to you, to help you understand when you start to feel in that way, to help you kind of unpack all the different feelings that go along with that. And to really go about it the right way, based on what you need, rather than what one particular agenda thinks that you should be. Anyway, I hope you have a great day, whoever you are. I hope this makes you think. You can feel free to disagree, and do so respectfully if you do. But let's have a conversation about this. Let's start talking about this, and let's hold counselors and doctors to a standard that they agreed to when they started their practice.